How are you? How's Mark? How's Mark, okay? Okay. If you need any help Tuesday on anything, let me know. We're down a lot of inspectors. Yeah. Yeah. Nothing unusual, right, Ellen? Thank you. Hi, John. You're looking good, John. You're looking good, John. It's Michael Pulitzer. Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Sure.
I'm good. Yep, I'm on now. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna shut off. All right.
Hey, how you doing? All right, thanks, Bill. Thanks, Kev. I'm here. I know, I'm just saying hi.
He calls our name and we respond.
Yeah, good morning. This is a meeting of the Nassau County Legislature's Finance Committee. And before we begin, I just want to thank Mr. David Moog, who is joining us remotely, I understand, together, I think, with Mr. Miles. And thank you for joining us. And we'll look forward to hearing what you've got to tell us. Now, the subject of the hearing is to understand the process for the issuance of the school tax bills for 2021, the school tax year 2021, and the SCAR, the Small Claims Assessment Review petitions filed for assessed values that are the basis for some of the school tax bills. And the reason we're doing it is that this is, as everyone knows, it's been a strange year, and we've had a number of challenges. We've had obviously the COVID-19 situation, which is, I'm going to tell myself, is the reason that we've got such a tremendous attendance over here, being that we do have such a fascinating subject. And as well as the fact that we've had a county-wide reassessment for the first time in many years, and you put those two things together, and you've got interesting times. So we want to just get information so that the residents will understand what the upcoming school taxes, how they've been arrived at, and the process. And with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Pulitzer to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Legislator Joshua Lafazan.
Here.
Thank you. Legislator Arnold Drucker. Ranking Member Ellen Birnbaum.
Here.
Legislator Rosemary Walker.
Hold on one.
Okay. Legislator Thomas McKevitt. Thank you. Vice Chairman Vincent Muscarella.
Here.
Thank you. And Chairman Howard Copel.
Here.
We have a quorum, sir.
Okay, how much does he pay?
Okay, Mr. Moog, good morning.
Good morning.
Once again, thank you for joining us. I hope you're well. And
Any security?
I think the way to start probably would be for me to ask you if you might be able to walk us through the process this year.
Normally, I have to say, okay.
Pardon me, I didn't hear that, sir.
We've got too much going on in the background there. Anyone who's not talking, could you please put your phones or computers on mute, please, so that we don't have a lot of this crosstalk and feedback.
Okay, that's okay, I understand.
I don't think it's working. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Moog, do you hear me?
From where in Italy? Where? Okay, sure.
Mr. Moog?
Yes, hello?
Okay, good. Okay,
And
so
you know,
I'm going to...
We're having some audio issues.
Yeah.
Hard to hear you.
I know.
It's
One
kind of
sec.
hard to hear.
One moment, please.
Yeah.
Is that better?
And I think there was no feedback with the computer.
Okay, Mr. Copel, could you repeat the question?
Okay, sure. Okay. I think we've hopefully eliminated the crosstalk. Yes, sir. So what I'd like is for you to walk us through the process for the typical process. In other words, when I say typical, I mean the statutory process for including timelines for issuing the various tax bills and warrants and so forth, for the roll, the dates for the tentative roll, the final roll, and so forth, and this year's variations from that process. We can start with that if that's okay with you.
You want to go through the process on how school builders?
Say again?
You want to go through the process on how the school bills?
No, I want to go through. I want to start with the assessment process itself.
Okay, the assessment process from beginning to end. You mean the timelines?
Correct. In other words, the dates at which which the tentative roll is arrived at for this upcoming school tax year. The tentative date, the final roll date, statutorily, as well as the process for this particular year, and how the variations from the statutory process and the reasons and the results.
Okay, it starts in 2018, where we generate the tax roll through multiple regression model. So we're SPS on a multiple regression model to come out with an assessment roll. That roll was submitted to OPS in September for validation, so we can issue a 511 notice on November 1st. November 1st.
Well, Mr. Moog, why don't you, forgive me, please, but I'm going to once in a while interrupt you. Your voice is a little choppy there. Perhaps you might get a little closer.
Okay, we're gonna.
And if we can, since there is the possibility that some taxpayers are listening in here, you're going to please avoid jargon or shortcuts. In other words, don't just say the 503 or something like that. Explain it. Go along with it. Now, once you're done.
Okay, one moment.
We're going to vary this proceeding, by the way, I should have said, from the typical, in that we're going to allow other members of the legislatures who do not happen to be members of the Finance Committee to participate as well and ask questions as well. And with that,
is this better?
Ahead. Yes, I think so. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, is this better, Mr. Capel?
I think so. Thank you.
Okay. So, starting in 2018, the county already had engaged SPS to do a task class 1 regression model, which was
one more thing. Is there anyone in the room with you?
Yes, Robert Miles.
He's not real. If he's not real, well, I'm just wondering if he's not real. I was wondering about the mask. Okay, whatever. You be safe. It's okay. Do whatever you need.
Well, Rob will keep 6 feet away. Because I have trouble hearing him.
Just be safe. Do whatever.
Okay, that's okay. Rob's sitting behind me. So, is that better? That's better.
Much
better for both of us, I think. So anyway, in 2018, we were developing the tax roll for 2021 based on a regression model provided by Matt Smith and SVS. Matt Smith and SVS was engaged by the county 2 years earlier in order to provide us the knowledge base in order to do the reassessment. So come September of 2018, we were under legal obligation to submit tentative roll to be validated by WUPS because of the 511 period under statutory real property tax law 511. WUPS needs to validate the roll in September. We would mail a notice out to all taxpayers by November 1st. From November 1st through December, taxpayers are allowed to come into the office and present any other information to help fine-tune the numbers in the roll. That's the purpose of the 511 period. And send it around the state. When you have a 511 period, taxpayers can come in and take a look at the values, question the values. Come January 2nd, 2019, the tentative roll is issued. On January 2nd through March 1st, the taxpayers have a legal ability to file a grievance with the Assessment Review Commission. So during that period, they filed the grievances. That period was extended, I think, 2 times to May 1st. And
that was by order of the governor, correct?
No. This was in 2019. This was extended by the legislature, the Nassau County Legislature. Extended the grievance period for ARC until May 1st. And then ARC does its process in reviewing all the grievances. And any cases that are unresolved from grievances or where taxpayers feel they didn't get the proper due process from Oct, they didn't get the results they wanted, have the right to file SCAR. Now, come April 1st of 2020, I sign a final roll after Oct finishes its business in February of 2020. And that final roll usually kicks off the period to file for small claim assessment review. Usually that period runs from April 1st to April 30th. But this year, due to COVID, Governor Cuomo told that date. They extended that deadline out. So the court system and the county clerk were unable to accept any applications until I think it was May 25th. And May 25th, the county clerk and the court opened the portal for people who send their applications in. And normally that period will last 30 days. But through continuing extensions granted by the governor, filing period didn't get completed until September 4th of this year. At September 4th, by September 18th, we had to close our systems down to any sort of decisions or mediation that we've done because we had to start calculating the school bills. And then those school bills are calculated and those warrants were sent out yesterday to the town receivers. They check the bills, they bill the bills, and people get the bills.
So all three?
What's that?
All of the receivers got it yesterday? All three? All three
The town receivers received their warrants yesterday, yes. They
'cause
received the files. They received the files, and the warrants were all signed for yesterday, and they received the files by a timely basis by yesterday afternoon.
Okay.
So that's the process from beginning to end. The timelines.
Okay. Now, in terms of actually what happened this year, you had a record number of protests filed. Isn't that correct? A very large number.
You had 80,104 SCAR petitions filed during this extended period. Yes.
And how does that compare to what the county would have found in a typical year going back? When I say typical, let's talk about the last 3-4 years.
Well, if you look going back to, we took a look back over to 2004 or 2003. When the reassessment was done in 2004, they had 75,000 grievances filed.
So you really didn't have that many more. Okay, fine. Now, in ARC, what were the results? In other words, you had the 80-some thousand filed.
We had approximately, I'm asking my John, about 240,000
I'm sorry,
ARC filed.
Say again, please?
240,000 ARC grievances were filed.
240,000, fine. And what were the results of that process?
80,000 were accepted, including
When you say
acceptance
accepted, what do
zero
you mean?
office.
When you say,
About 60,000 received reductions, 80,000 accepted the ARC results.
okay, and the rest of them proceeded to SCAR?
SCAR is the decision of the taxpayer. The taxpayer has the right to file for a SCAR if they don't feel like they've received they didn't receive the results they wanted from the ARC proceeding.
So I understand that, but I guess let me rephrase that. Did many of those who did not come to a reduction at ARC, how many of those proceeded to file SCAR?
Well, 160,000 grievances were not resolved at ARC, but only 80,000 ARC proceedings were initiated.
No, I'm
SCAR
asking,
petitions were filed. I'm sorry.
I thought it was me.
SCAR
Fine.
petitions filed.
So about 80,000 SCAR petitions were initiated?
Yes.
And this year, those 80,000, would that have taken them beyond, that would have happened, in other words, beyond the final tax roll at that point?
And, pardon me?
In other words, the ones that proceeded to SCAR,
Right.
those would be the ones that, should a reduction be granted at SCAR, those would be ones that would be eligible for a county refund. Would that be correct?
No, well, if they filed for SCAR and we completed the hearing or got resolution of the case before like September 18th, they would be adjusted on the 2021 roll before the school bill or the other bills are adjusted. It wouldn't be on the county guarantee if we resolved it before September 18th.
Understood. So what were the results, in fact, before September 18th?
Okay, 80,104 cases were filed. 58,000 cases were settled in mediation. In the end, the remaining cases were 11,654 cases. I will just take a pause here, just mention that our staff here did a remarkable job, an outstanding job. The courts commended us. The tax rep firms commended us on how we resolved over 84% of the cases. 84% of the cases were resolved in a very quick manner during the COVID crisis, and it was also done all through remote hearings because there was original lockdown, and then when we came back, all these cases were done remotely. So systems had to be set up through the IT division. They worked through every day, 6-7 days a week to get this done. My staff were able to get through so many cases because none of them took vacation. I don't think anyone called in sick during those days. We put a full effort into this, and it's a really commendable. We really have to commend the CSEA staff for doing something that was beyond really the expectation of the court, of the tax reps, of anyone who was in this process.
Well,
to get
I think
84% of the cases resolved in this short time frame.
I think that all of us here will join in congratulating the members of our CSEA workers who generally do a wonderful job for the county altogether, overall.
Yes.
So, question is, so now at SCAR, looking at that process just a little bit, do both sides present legal arguments? Would that be correct? Legal and factual.
Both sides present their side of the argument. That is correct.
And do both sides then get a chance to refute the others' legal arguments, if legal and factual?
Yes, each side is able to submit comparable sales to justify their case.
No, what I mean is that if let's say the petitioner submits, let's say if the county submits legal arguments, the petitioner submits legal arguments in a case. I'm not even talking about comps. Does each side have a chance to submit responding briefs to those initial briefs?
Yes, they can.
Oh, okay, because someone told me that they were not able to. Okay. Does the county end up at SCAR presenting on occasion values that are higher, comps that are higher than the initial values that were used to set up an assessment?
We submit comps in order to best justify the value that we have going forward the case. As any lawyer would, we bring forth the best possible comps to justify our number.
What I mean, what I'm asking though, Mr. Moog, was, are those comps the same comps that you used initially, or that were used initially in establishing the assessment, or are these new comps that are redone? In other words, you're going out and looking for new ones.
When we did the assessment roll, it was done through a multiple regression model, which incorporated all the sales of the county through a multiple regression modeling system. So
some taxpayers,
I'm saying the values themselves were generated for the roll through a model process. When we go to defend the case, we bring comparable sales because it's a review of the values that are generated from the model.
I'm sorry, are those different comps, or are those the same exact ones that were? Well,
we don't use comparables to generate the initial values. We use a model which uses all the sales for the entire county.
Right. And
so when we do a multiple regression model, which is provided by SVS was engaged to do the modeling, and we reviewed the modeling. They use sales throughout the entire county. That's one process. When you go to SCAR, you have to justify those values using comparable sales. And that's what we did. We brought our comparable sales in to justify the values going forward to defend the case, as any legal proceeding would be done. You defend your case, you defend your values using whatever sales, but these values, the values initially generated were generated through a model. So it wasn't generated through comparables, it was generated through hundreds of sales through a multiple regression model.
And are those comps that you use then, are those usually within the same school district?
We use whatever comparables, we usually in the same school district, we use whatever evidence we can bring forward to justify the values.
That's not what I asked. Are those comps within the same school district, or are those sometimes outside the school district?
As far as I know, because we did review 80,000 cases, I can't speak for every single case, but vast majority we use within the same school district.
In the SCAR proceeding?
Yes.
Okay. Could you?
I'm not intimately knowledgeable of every single case. It was 80,000 of them, but
is there a policy that the comps that are brought should be within the same school district?
yes.
That is the policy. Okay. Okay. Now, what we would like to know, I think that would be very useful for us. You said you had 11,600 something?
11,654.
Okay. So if we could have, I think, and you could provide this, I think, to majority council and minority council, that would be both would be interested, is a spreadsheet for Class 1 properties. And I think Legislator Rhodes asked for this some time ago. Yeah, so I'm going to ask Legislator Rhodes to just go ahead and explain that once again, exactly what we would want in the spreadsheets. But what I understand it would be all of the initial assessed valuation for each property, the grievance request, results from ARC, results from SCAR. And why don't you jump in?
Mr. Chairman, you've summarized it quite well, actually.
Well,
what we're looking for is a score.
I'm sorry. What are you requesting?
What we're looking for is a scorecard of results, essentially. A breakdown of the challenges, a breakdown of the actions taken by ARC with respect to those challenges, and then a breakdown of those that went to SCAR and how those were resolved.
Let me ask my.
Once again, I'm going to summarize it once more.
Is this of the remaining cases of all the cases?
No, let me do it again. I'll go through all of it again.
This would be of all the cases, and if you wish, Mr. Moog, and not to cut the chairman off, certainly, we can submit that request in writing. It's something that we actually had asked for during your appearance at the budget hearings at this point, I guess, on the 14th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, if you provide it in writing, I'll have council look at it, and we'll provide whatever information they feel is appropriate.
I think that's a good suggestion. We'll do it, and we'll agree. We'll do it in writing. But once again, just so you understand, we would want all of the assessed, all the properties Class 1, the assessed valuations, the grievance requests in each case, that in which such a grievance was made, the results in each case out of ARC and SCAR, and one additional item that we haven't mentioned here now would be, we'd be interested in knowing what the exposure to the county potentially would be on the 11,600 cases remaining. In other words, if there are a lot of $50,000 variations in assessed valuations, that's one thing, and if there's several hundreds of thousands or even millions, if they're North Shore homes that are worth well into the millions, that variation could result in a heavy exposure. So we would like to get a feel for what the exposure to the county might be should we lose many of those cases, the remaining cases that have not yet been resolved.
Okay, so you want that information to try to figure out some liability. Okay, well, you make the request and my counsel will review it and we'll provide the information as soon as possible.
Okay, is there a reason that council might reject something like that?
I don't know. I always write in things by counsel.
Because,
So,
okay,
but I
understand.
don't see any reason why, but it's prudent on my behalf to always do that. Make sure.
Let me
I
just
don't
say
see any reason. I don't see any reason why, but I always make sure my counsel is involved with it.
all right, but just let me just say that I don't see a reason either, and that's something that a legislature should have.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to let legislators, other legislators, talk with you as well. So, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I actually had an opportunity to question Mr. Miles quite extensively on Monday, so I'm going to defer to other legislators. But I did want to make the point, though, Mr. Moog, that with respect to that last item and the county's potential exposure, I want you to understand, and you certainly should understand, we're voting on a budget today. So, you know, the fact that, and I was a little surprised, to be perfectly honest, that the Department of Assessment had no idea with respect to the county's potential exposure as it pertains to those 11,645 SCAR petitions that are still pending, because that's directly relevant to our budget liability for next year, which we're considering this afternoon.
Well,
this
I will say that, Mr. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that this isn't something that, you know, can sort of wait for us to send a letter and council will consider it and we'll provide whatever information we feel like we're going to provide. You know, as a legislature, we've got a responsibility to know the county's potential liabilities, and as a Department of Assessment, you have a responsibility to provide that information, obviously both to the administration and to us, so that we can make logical, knowledgeable choices with respect to our budget for next year. So time is of the essence on that, and I would have hoped that based upon Monday's discussion that process had already begun. So while we can wait on the scorecarding of the 250 some odd grievances that were filed for the 2021 year and how that process worked out, the final numbers in the county's potential exposure is something that we need to know right away.
Well, I will say this, since these cases, the 11,654 cases are individual cases going to individual hearing offices with taxpayers exercising their right to grieve, the outcomes are really unknown to us. But that being said, you know, you could take an accounting figure and we could give you a range on an accounting figure, but it's, again, it's a range based on just an estimate. It would be probably anywhere between $250,000 and $7.5 million, somewhere in that range. But again, it's an accounting figure, and it's also based on outcomes that we don't know from independent hearing offices.
It's something more than an accounting figure. When we're talking about potential liability, I'm talking about if the 11,645 SCAR petitioners, taxpayers, were to win, what is the county's potential liability, right? That's what our potential exposure is, right? That doesn't mean that that's going to happen, but we need to know what the county's full potential exposure is as a result of those 11,645 petitions not being heard and now being subject to the county guarantee if they succeed. So that's my point.
Okay.
And that point is just to put a number onto it, which is probably important. If we had an average of $500 reduction in taxes, I'm not talking about assessed valuations, for those 12,000 cases, and that's not a lot, $500 I think, when a case does get settled. That's already $6 million in terms of budgetary impact, and it's a significant number, and that's why Legislator Rhodes is pushing that. It's important. We need to know those numbers.
We will provide numbers to you on that, but I just want to mention that the 11,654 cases, 99% of them received mediated offers. They were reviewed by our office, and they're reviewed by ARC. So we feel confident that these are good numbers, but we don't know what the outcome will be in front of an independent hearing officer. But we'll provide you any data you need on this.
Yeah. but these are the ones that didn't get settled. In other words, the ones that did get settled are the easier ones almost by definition. Okay, there's no reason to quibble.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead, Mr. Drucker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question. Again, I think I asked something of this question the other day, but in follow-up to my colleague Legislator Rhodes' question, does the Department of Assessment, Mr. Moog, ever estimate the sum total of possible refunds the county would have to pay based on the number of unresolved SCAR petitions each and every year at the time the legislature has to vote on the budget?
Not that I know of.
So this has never happened before?
Not that I know of, no.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Mr. McKevitt?
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. I hate to go and backtrack to the original part of the process, but I just wanted to clarify one issue which you mentioned in your initial testimony, that when the original values were devised, you know, SVS had done the modeling approach through a multiple regression model. And the reason why I'm asking is I just decided to pull up a My NASA Property, the report, which I'll have to say is very comprehensive. There's a lot of good and helpful information on it. And I do commend your office for keeping up to date because it's very helpful to research these issues. So I just went to my own house, and it gives you a number of tabs you can look at. You know, the values, general and school taxes, open pay taxes. And the last tab says Tax Class 1 Res Prognos. So when I click on that and I go to the print report, it gives me a list of 6 comparable homes, similar to mine, at least in sort of location as well as class of homes with values to it. So what is the relevance of that print report on the website as far as how the value of my home was come up with?
Okay, well, that initial report was generated for the 5/11 period.
Right.
So it enabled taxpayers, because we did a multiple regression model, but enabled them also to see some comparables in the area. Now, if they had a question or an objection or something about the properties or what the inventory of their property was, able to bring it into our office and discuss it with one of our assessors. So it was to demonstrate possible comparables, but the actual values are generated through a regression model. I went through this earlier a couple of years ago, and a regression model uses hundreds of sales in order to generate a value, and those models were provided by SVS. As you know, SVS was engaged by the county, I think in 2016, to start this process and generate models. Now, use of regression models is commonplace throughout all 50 states. Almost every jurisdiction that does any sort of reassessment uses models. But every taxpayer has a right and exercise in Nassau County, as well as everybody else, to grieve their value and to bring forth evidence to prove their case. And that's what the Assessment Review Commission does. And if they're not satisfied, they go through SCAR. So those two processes of ARC and SCAR allow taxpayers to bring comparables to prove their case. But the original values were generated through a model.
So if a person then goes through ARC and go through SCAR, the homes which are listed, these 6 homes listed on this report, they may be used by the department in order to justify the determination of value, or you could then find 6 completely different other homes in order to try to go and justify the determination?
Well, you have to remember when those sales were put up, they were put up in November, and there's a lag period of sales. So it takes about 3 months to 4 months of sales to register, to go through the county clerk and come to us and be validated. So even though we put up those sales to demonstrate to taxpayers, when you go to ARC and when you go to SCAR, and especially when you go to SCAR as a respondent, we're able to use sales up to January of the year, even though those sales, were not fully available for that demonstration purposes for taxpayers. So there are sales that come forth in that fiscal year, in that calendar year, that we can use, and we could use any sale to try to defend our assessment. Yes.
So
the sales in that land record viewer was to demonstrate to taxpayers during the 5/11 period, and again, those sales probably ran up to about August, and then from August through December, other sales come in, And when we go to SCAR, we're able to use sales for the entire calendar year.
Just for information, the comparables in my house, one of them was October 11th, 2018. So just throw it out
Okay,
there.
that was a more recent sale that did get in. But sales sometimes take 3-4 months to get through the process, only because attorneys take a while to register with the clerk, and then the clerk sends up regular file uploads to us and then has to go through a process here. So sometimes it delays from attorneys on the closing attorney filing with the county clerk. Sometimes it's just a timing mechanism between the clerk and our office.
Understood. One other point I just want to get to is, so we have these over 11,000 SCAR proceedings, which still have to be adjudicated, and obviously some will, the department's determination will be sustained, and some will invariably have a change. It may be minor, may not be minor. But what I'm getting concerned is for those that do receive reductions between now and the rest of the year, is my understanding that is going to be the attempt of the department to make those corrections on the second half school bills, which go out in approximately April or so of 2021?
We're engaged in the same process that was engaged for the past 20 years on these issues. So when you have SCAR cases resolved, and they resolved before March or so, we adjust the second half bill, which was done during the Gallardo administration, it's done during the Swazi administration, it's done during the Mangano administration. This is not something new. This has actually been basically pro forma SOP for years. So those taxpayers who prepay the entire year, if they get adjustment, those taxpayers will receive a refund check.
Right. But for those, for example, I'll just throw out there in the North Belmar School District, let's say you go and you have 10 people who are getting reductions for its worth when it comes down to that bill was come out in April. Does that have any impact on the bills for the rest of the people within that school district? Because if some people are going down, it may be very minor, wouldn't it then be possible that some people then would have bills in the second half higher than the above? It may be only pennies or so, but would that be a possibility? Or
no, that's it. That's actually why the county guarantee, when the adjustment's made, it's coming out of the county coffer on that. So okay. There's no adjustment to their bill. The county's reimbursing the school district for the adjusted bill. So there's no adjustment to the levy to the other taxpayers. It's strictly that's how the county guarantee works. It sort of prevents any adjustment of the bill in the second half.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have some other questions from legislators. Legislator Kennedy, did you have a question? I thought he had his hand up there. Okay, Legislator Ferretti.
Hello, Mr. Moon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Ferretti.
Okay, great. Mr. Moon, the county clerk has reported that for the 2021 SCAR season, 92,678 SCAR filings were filed in her office.
No, I just want to correct you. It's 80,104.
Well, I know that's what you were saying, but the county clerk's office is reporting a number with over 12,000 more SCAR filings.
No, that I think the county clerk provided you all the Article 7s included. SCAR is only for tax class 1. So it's 80,104. We got that from the court.
Okay, so how many Article 7s were there?
I'm not sure. Do you know how many Article 7s there were?
They can still file.
They can still file an Article 7, so it's a continual count. So it's still changing that number. The SCAR case, the SCAR deadline already passed, but the Article 7 deadline has not passed yet.
So to date, with approximately 12,000 Article 7 sound about right? Would that be the difference in the two numbers?
I guess that, yeah, it'd probably be an estimate, right? That's probably close, yes.
Okay. Now, let's go back to the
Wait, you're breaking up a little bit, Mr. Freddie.
I'll try to get a little closer. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Let's go back to the 1920 SCARs. How many SCAR filings were there for 1920?
In 1920, there were, let's see, 1920, 8,400.
So roughly 10% of what we had this year.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, out of those 8,400, how many of those were mediated?
On the 8,400 or the 80,000? I'm sorry, I missed that.
The 1920, 8,400. We're only talking about 1920. How many were mediated?
None of them were mediated. They all went through hearings.
Okay, so none of them were settled at SCAR prior to a hearing.
They all went to a hearing.
Yeah. Now, how many of those were adjudicated, settled, whatever, for the date where the county guarantee kicks in 1920?
How many? Everyone except for 44 cases.
Okay. So then, when Legislator Drucker asked a few minutes ago about if the question of tax liability ever came up in the past, and you responded no, that's because for the most part there was no tax liability, right?
Just for that 1 year. If you look at other past years, there's quite a bit of liability.
How about in the last 5 years?
5 years, there was considerable liability in one of the past 5 years, yes. Am I
Now,
right?
Okay.
Yes.
Now to the 2021 SCAR. Well, I appreciate you walking us through the process.
Wait. I'm sorry, you're breaking up again. I'm sorry.
See if I can move it a little closer even. How's that? Better?
Yes.
Yeah, that's better. Don't worry, show your face.
Okay. You're going to see me up close and personal. I'm sorry for that.
That's right.
So,
Getting closer, I can see your teeth and do some dentistry work.
so 2021, and I thank you for going through the entire process.
Right.
So I want to make sure I got the numbers up. How many residents filed at ARC for 2021?
How many filed for SCAR, you said?
No, ARC. With the Assessment Review Commission, the challenge.
ARC was approximately 240,000.
And how many were settled at ARC?
80,000.
So 80,000 received reductions, correct? With ARC?
60,000 received reductions, 20,000 just discontinued.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but after the ARC process, we were told that the roll was accurate, correct?
That is correct.
So what is the necessity for settling the 50,000 at SCAR? What's the risk if the roll was accurate?
The risk it comes about when you're doing mediation, you're looking at the results coming from SCAR hearings. And in order to mitigate any sort of liability, you can mediate. And this was a process we actually started negotiating with the court last year to do mediation. And so when you get SCAR decisions coming down, you try to do a predictive manner in order to mediate cases. And most of them were mediated in a very timely fashion with some minimal reductions sometimes. And some actually for 24% of the cases with 0 reductions.
Well, but I'll just go back to the question. If the roll was completely accurate and there was no fear that we were going to lose any cases at SCAR, then there would be no need to settle, right?
The roll is accurate. When you talk about accuracy of a roll, you're talking the accurate roll from a multiple regression basis. When you go to SCAR, every taxpayer is able to bring individual information, and then the individual hearing officer will decide it's his opinion of value that determines the determination. As anyone would know, if you hire, let's say, 5 appraisers, those 5 appraisers will come in with 5 different values for the same home, even with the same comparables. So when you go to a hearing officer, the hearing officer has his opinion from the comparables brought forth from DOA, as well as comparables from the petitioner, and that individual hearing officer make a decision. When we do mediation, we're just looking at the possible risk of a reduction as a result from the mediation, from the decision from SCAR. So it's not that the roll was inaccurate. The roll was still highly accurate based on a multiple regression model, based on the standards, based on outside experts, both from Newsday and from our own internal hiring of an outside expert. But taxpayers do have the right to bring forth a SCAR hearing after ARC to make their case. And sometimes the hearing officer has a different opinion of value than we have. It's an opinion of value that comes out from SCAR. And we chose to go through a predictive manner to see if there's exposure in the remaining cases to try to resolve those cases before they go to SCAR. And we did that this year. And again, I mentioned 24% of those cases mediated received a 0 offer. They were resolved with no money. And many were resolved with very small reductions. But it's just a matter of risk management. That's why it was done.
What percentage, if you know, what percentage of the 80,000 at SCAR were pro se SCAR filers?
How many pro ses? We have 500 pro ses left.
Yeah, it was very small percentage.
It was like, do you have the number, 2,400, was it?
Percentage points.
How much?
A very few percentage
It was a very small percentage for pro ses. We have 500 pro ses remaining, I think.
Well, you have 500 remaining, but was it a very small percentage of the total amount at SCAR that were pro se?
A very small percentage. I don't have the number in front of me on that. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And what about the filings at ARC? What were the percentage of pro se filers at ARC?
That I don't have on me right now.
I think so.
Was
There's a
it
small percent? No. ARC had a larger percentage, but I'm not sure the number. I don't have that on me.
Do you know if it was approaching 50% at ARC that were pro se?
No, it was less than 50%, but I don't know the exact percentage.
Okay.
I know there was a lot of pro ses filed at ARC, but I'm not sure the number or the percentage. If it was 30%, 25%, I'm really not sure.
Okay, but it was a significant amount.
It was a more significant amount, yes.
Because my concern is that we seem to have set up a process where, essentially we're offering settlements at the SCAR point in the process, which is over 95% tax grievance firms, and it seems like it's an unfair advantage to those residents who, challenge their assessment through grievance firms rather than pro se. I mean, this is a process that nobody knew was coming. It's almost a second bite at the apple.
No, I would say all taxpayers, even pro ses, when they receive the results from ARC, I think are notified that they can file with SCAR. And we did have mediated settlements on pro ses from our office. The pro se cases were treated with the same respect as tax rep cases in offering mediation.
If I may chime in.
Mr. Miles, who's the deputy assessor of SCAR process, I'll let him chime in.
We set up a separate mediation program for the pro ses specifically to address that concern. And they were able to call in and address I can't hear the legislature.
Well, Mr. Miles, that doesn't address my concern, because my concern is that pro se filers didn't know they had this opportunity.
No, you let them know that they had this opportunity. We created a whole separate program. And we sent out, I believe, a mailing that said that they had this opportunity. And they were provided a separate call-in number to call into our expert staff to discuss the mediation offers that we sent out to the pro ses. And they were able to negotiate themselves on a phone call with a personal SCAR representative to discuss the offer that they were given.
So Mr. Miles, every pro se residential tax assessment grievance who went to ARC was sent a notice that there was going to be a mediation program at SCAR and that they would have another opportunity to sit down and discuss their assessment?
I'm not sure what happened at ARC, but I know that when we did our own review of all filings from petitioners, we made sure to also include pro ses, and we created a separate program for the pro ses.
You included pro ses who had filed a SCAR petition, correct?
Of course.
And that's my point, that pro se grievance at ARC were not aware that this mediation program was going to exist at SCAR. And so they didn't know that they were going to have another opportunity at SCAR to settle their assessment grievance.
When people file a SCAR, the mediation process is a process through the court system. So in any case, when you file for an Article 7, or if you file Article 7A, or if you file any case in New York State, there's always a mediation process. That's a universal process throughout the state. And we decided to avail ourselves of that during this period to get as many cases resolved before the county guarantee would kick in. So anyone filing any litigation, there's always a mediation portion to it. And it's been expanded to Article 7. Pro ses going into SCAR always know they can go to a hearing. Mediation is just our way of resolving the case before. It doesn't mean we give more money. It doesn't mean that we are making it easier. It's just that we try to resolve the case before the filing period ends, or before the county guarantee period ends, and that they can avail themselves of SCAR at any time. So it's not like they got something special, money's given out or special favors given out. This was just try to replicate the type of results you would receive from a SCAR petition by a hearing officer.
Thank you. And Mr. Moog, out of the 50,000 that have been mediated at SCAR, 50,000 and
58,000.
58,000, sorry. How many of those received a reduction at SCAR through mediation?
You have the
Yeah, it's 58 minus 14.
14,000 received 0 offers, no offer, and the remainder received an offer.
So 46,000, I'm sorry, 44,000 received a reduction?
Yes.
Yeah, 44,000 were offered reductions. Yes, and accepted.
So if you include the ARC number of approximately 60,000 reductions through settlement and add the 44,000 that were settled at SCAR with a reduction, we're at approximately 104,000 reductions through settlement, correct?
Correct.
And that's out of how many properties that grieve their assessment in total?
240,000.
So 104,000 out of 240,000. Would you call that mass settlement?
No.
What would the threshold be to be considered mass settlement?
Mass settlement is when you set up a general parameter of just giving a straight percentage cut to properties or creating a stratified cuts that would not result would result in cuts that were not done through analysis. Every mediated offer had comparable properties attached to it, and analysis was done on every individual property before a mediated offer was given out. So a mass settlement process doesn't use any analysis or any appraisal background. It just uses strictly, we're going to give 3%, 4%, 5% on properties to clear cases. That wasn't the case here. We had reductions of 0. We had reductions of 1%, 5%, 10%, depending on how the comparables pointed and how it was negotiated with the individual petitioner.
So in 1920, we know that at SCAR, we didn't give any reductions through settlement.
Right.
But how many reductions at ARC through settlement were there in 1920?
1920? I'm not sure the exact number. I think it was between 170 and 190,000 reductions in 1920.
So this entire reassessment process, which was supposed to, eliminate essentially the necessity to grieve your assessment, has resulted in 104,000 settlement reductions, where the previous system, which we all acknowledge was completely broken, was approximately 170,000.
The 170,000 were based on strictly the infants level assessment being granted at ARC compared to what was being used at the Department of Assessment. It was a grossly inaccurate assessment roll by all measure. And people who had comparable properties next to each other paid very different tax bills. The idea of bringing equity to the tax roll was important.
Mr. Moog, I completely understand that the system was broken. The point of reassessing is to fix it, and I would have hoped that by fixing it, we wouldn't have 104,000 grievance being granted settlement reductions. But we do. I appreciate your responses, and thank you to both you and Mr. Miles.
Thank you.
Mr. Rhodes?
Yeah, just a couple of quick follow-ups. Legislator Drucker made the point, which was addressed by Legislator Ferretti as well. We do budget for grievances, for certiorari's, both residential and commercial, in one lump sum in our budget. There's $30 million in the budget for certiorari's. My concern is the fact that in 1920, we were dealing with, as Mr. Moog has testified, 44 petitions that were still pending at the time bills were issued. That at the time, our September 18th deadline, at the time the county guarantee would kick in. We budgeted $30 million last year for certiorari payments with 44 residential petitions still outstanding. We have the same $30 million in the budget this year with nearly 12,000 petitions that are still pending. And so that's the reason that I'm asking the question, and the reason that it's relevant is because I have no confidence that the $30 million that we budgeted is actually nearly enough. And are we going to wind up with having some sort of massive liability that we haven't been able to account for in the budget? That's the reason for the question. There's such a huge discrepancy between where we were last year and where we are this year. When we're in the budget process, we want to make sure that we've accounted for that.
But the distinction, Legislator Rhodes, is that we are now going to court defending a much more accurate role.
Are we?
And that, I certainly believe so. So that's certainly a distinction. And I think what is rather telling is that there's been a substantial number of settlements in which the taxpayer agreed to no change. So taxpayers are settling quite a bit with accepting the fact that the assessment is accurate. After they filed a grievance and filed a petition with SCAR, they're settling, saying, okay, we accept that you're not going to reduce our taxes. I think that's a distinction. So maybe we can hear from someone from the administration about the amount budgeted for refunds and see if that's changing, if they anticipate something. I see we have Andy coming up.
Well, I know that and Andy, you certainly have an opportunity to answer that question, but the concern that I have is that as of right now, we have no idea what the potential exposure is. The Department of Assessment doesn't have any idea what the potential exposure is. That's still a number that they have to calculate. So, unless that was calculated independently by the administration, I don't know how you can answer that question, but if you want to choose to, go ahead.
I did state earlier that, the department believes it to be somewhere between $2.25 million and $7.5 million. But again, it is determined on the decisions from an independent hearing officer. So the number is probably going to be somewhere between that range, but I can't say definitively because we don't know when decisions will come out and how they'll be coming out.
I know that you're giving me an estimate of what you think will happen, but the information that I'm looking for is what is the county's potential exposure. In other words, if those 11, as I explained before, if those 11,600 and some odd homeowners succeed in their petition, get what they're asking for, right? Because they've got to give a value, right? They're the ones that have the burden of proof of defending that value is accurate, right? But if let's say they're able to meet that burden and a SCAR officer says, you know what, you're right. What's the county's potential exposure at that point? What's the total number? That's the information that I'm looking for. Andy?
Well, as I mentioned before, we believe it's going to be somewhere between $2.25 and $7.5 million, and that's the information. We'll provide any data you want for put in your request. We'll provide the data, and we'll carry the conversation on after that.
Legislator, I guess the two things I would say that. One is we have $30 million appropriated. We had it this year. We've had it historically, I think, for the past few years. We've allocated $30 million in cert liability. Now, what I think from the residential side, what I'm hearing, the 12,000 cases, I think we probably have enough budget appropriation to cover that shortfall based on the number of cases. Remember now, the Class 4s are the lion's share of what our exposure is. So we have the DAF set up to cover those shortages, which should add some relief in the operating budget for these Class 1 claims should they come in. So, I mean, combined total, I don't think residential is going to exceed 30 million. And from what Mr. Moog is telling me, I think the 7 million at the top end of his thing, even if it does go to 10, I think the budget for 2021 can absorb that exposure that we may have.
How would you believe that the budget can absorb it?
Well, as it stands now, we have $30 million in the budget for that. So my point is that if the Class 1s come in at 10 million, I will then have 20 million for other things, or I'll have freed up 20 million, or I can use some to pay additional Class 4 cert claims to buy down some of the exposure and the liability. The other thing, too, is we really don't calculate the liability till the end of the year on a counting basis, but that may not be the true liability that we have because it's a negotiated settlement is what's happening. So, I think from the budgetary standpoint, I think there's enough, that 30 should cover Mr. Moog's shortage that he may have in grievances. If it doesn't and we get a judgment against us, it's like everything else. I mean, we will have to then readjust money and move it around to cover the shortfall if we have it. So.
Well, I mean, part of the issue is that we haven't been doing that historically. I mean, we have $580 million in somewhat debt that we owe to county taxpayers, certiorari debt that we owe to county taxpayers, right?
That's correct, but remember, included in that 580 is the one property.
I'm just trying to make sure we're not in a situation where we're adding to that number.
And I don't believe that. I think the budget will cover that. There'll be no Class 1 liability, I hope, by the end of next year. And I think with the more defendable role, as stated, we have to start believing at some point that the numbers we're putting out there, and after adjustments, that we will have a defendable role that will limit the number of cases that we will be getting. But, it is subjective. I mean,
well, we were supposed to have the defendable role this year, right, for 2021. I mean, but, part of the issue that I have is that as much as the Department of Assessment has been telling us, and the administration has been telling us, that this is the most accurate roll that you can achieve, this is a roll where the Department of Assessment, through the process, identified tens of thousands of errors before that roll went final on April 1st. And the grievance and the SCAR petition process started. Yet you've had 60,000 after that roll went. You've had 60,000 people receive reductions in ARC. You've had another 44,000 people, so roughly over 25% of the entire roll after the discovery of tens of thousands of errors during the course of the process. You've had an acknowledgement now on behalf of the county that over a quarter of the roll, representing about 40% of all people who filed petitions, was incorrect. And for the 300,000 properties that weren't subject to that, all of those reductions result in an increase, a corresponding increase to other homeowners that had no idea that that increase was actually coming.
I don't want to speak.
I don't know how we say that the roll is accurate. I mean, I'm not quite sure what a regression model means, and maybe that means something in assessment parlance. But with respect to sort of where the rubber hits the road, where the taxpayer is concerned, I don't know how we can say that this roll was accurate when we're acknowledging that there's over 100,000 mistakes.
Look, David,
first, I want to say that when we completed this roll, it was vetted independently by an independent expert. It was vetted by OPS, and it was vetted by even experts that Newsday brought forth.
But Mr. Moore,
so it wasn't accurate. It wasn't an accurate roll.
But what we've been saying all along, Mr. Moog, is that while you can have experts and you can have Newsday and you can say as much as you want about how accurate the roll was, you won't know how accurate the roll is until you've seen the end of the process. And we are at the, well, except for 12,000 homeowners, we are at the end of the process now. And what that process has shown us is that over 1/4 of the values were still wrong to the point where we had to offer settlements in order to resolve those cases. Or
I just want to point out that probably from the ARC reductions and from SCAR reductions, the vast majority of these adjustments were of minimal nature. They were probably under 5%. And as I pointed out before, you could have multiple appraisers come in on the same property with the same comparables and come up with different values. The multiple regression model that's used gives values on a mass scale, and that mass scale values were accurate for the most part. But at the same time, people do have the right to grieve. They have the right to file petitions and the right to have properties heard on an individual basis.
And
there will be adjustments made no matter who does the tax roll. If a reassessment's done, there will be adjustments made through the grievance and ARC process. And that's universal not only in Nassau, but universal throughout the country. If you read any sort of assessment journals, when a reassessment is done after a number of years of a frozen roll or an inaccurate roll, you have a large number of grievances filed to fine-tune the number. But a lot of these adjustments are very small adjustments.
But if the overall, to Legislator Ferretti's point, if the overall idea is that we were going to have an accurate roll to the point where we could reduce the number of grievances that we're receiving on an annual basis, not having to put taxpayers through the process of having to fight for us to be able